you know, the crash is here. The video game crash is coming. The money ran out and game development is in a free fall. Interesting. Let's take a look at it, shall we? Apparently the video game crashing scene is happening, actually, which is going to be very interesting to see.
Video games as a whole may not be crashing, but perhaps the types of games that lots of us love are experiencing a bit of a crash. Let me explain. I'm going to start with John and Brenda Romero. They were obviously there for the game crash of the 80s. They've had ups and downs, so whenever they said that the current state of the industry is, to quote, definitely crashier than back in the infamous 1980s crash, it's probably time to listen. And not just because they're big legacy names and you might think about Doom or something. No, it's also because they literally run a game studio today. It's a few hours down the road from me in Galway, which is to say they're in the real games industry and they're speaking to a real problem that you'll hear talked about in game industry circles, that you'll hear be talked about between devs, but it hasn't really made it out to the public. But make no mistake, this game crash is impacting you. And scrappy indie devs are amazing, but they're not yet the solution. We have a lot to cover today.
Yeah, but even then, it's like, I kind of knew there was going to be a video game crash. The question is when it's going to happen. That's the biggest question.
And by the end, a lot of the vibes that you may have felt, I think, will start to make a lot more sense. We've got big names saying it feels crashier now than it did in the 80s. That, of course, doesn't make any sense if you don't know just what the hell went on in the 80s. Basically, it happened in the US where a big surge of cheap, terrible games for the Atari consoles just led to retailers refusing to stock games from publishers. They were quite literally getting overloaded with slop, and a lot of that slop ended up in the landfills. Now, as we talked about before, the growth of digital distribution and platform-agnostic games means that the crash just cannot happen in the same way today as it did way back then. We're in a totally different era for getting games to players.
Yeah.
It's way more diversified. There are so many games, perhaps too many games,
Yeah, there is
no
too
good way to
much.
get them right in front of players. That problem won't go away, but it is an entirely different problem to the problem of today. Because when the Romeros talk about being in a crash,
Let's see, there are a few people that have not been affected of their partners, or their partners affected, or they're worried about being affected. It's really difficult time right now.
they're looking at it from the other end of the spectrum. Not buying games, but actually making the damn things. And to make them, you need to somehow pay for them. And the funding collapse, especially in Western markets, is completely goddamn brutal. Now, the Romeros felt this
Well, if we're talking about the Western side, you know, I wonder why. I wonder why it's collapsing in the Western side. Huh. I wonder why.
firsthand whenever Xbox pulled the plug on their next game. Remember, big like Xbox layoffs, all of that stuff that was happening? Well, yeah, their game got cancelled. And thing is, they were technically lucky. According to a GDC survey, 1 in 3 developers in the US had been laid off in the last 2 years. I'm not sure.
It's because, well, one of the big major reasons is because they hired so many developers during the pandemic era. You know, because like there was like this big old surge of video game pricing or so in the pandemic, and so they started hiring a lot more people and started making more games. But the problem is the pandemic never really lasted that long. Like they thought it was gonna last like for a while, for a really long time. So I think that's the only reason, you know.
What the numbers are for UK and Ireland, and the Romeros are now based in Ireland, but I think you do get the point. It's pretty rough out there. When a AAA studio or an indie collapses, and
Plus at the same time too as well, you know, when it comes to like certain, at least certain developers, at least in the Western side, they've just not been making great games compared to like the Eastern Asian side. I don't know if he'll talk about the Eastern Asian side, but I know that for a fact, specifically if you compare, you know, apples to apples, you know.
all those developers are left scrambling. They don't just magically become new indie devs ready to launch new projects. Some, many I'd wager, have to simply leave the industry, you know, because they need to do things like eat or support their families. Now, that means you lose out on all of their game making knowledge. If you ever think, why do a series of games or maybe some long running game, whatever it may be, maybe you think, oh, they're repeating the same mistakes again, or oh, the new content just doesn't feel quite as crafted or whatever as it used to in the past. Very often, it's because knowledge has just walked out the door. And while getting a job at another AAA or something
That
similar,
is true. The old people who had that knowledge specifically back then are so left, and then the new people are there, and they're kind of basically, don't really know that specific knowledge. But also at the same time, the decision makings of the head ups or so to get the broader audiences is what basically kind of like kills it. It kind of kills a lot of the games in general because they try to cater to everybody. And like, take a look at Monster Hunter Wilds, for example. That's probably like the best example. They try to cater to a broader audiences, but literally they drop the ball so massively. Besides the optimization, I'm talking about just like the core identity of Monster Hunter. When you're comparing to Wilds to Worlds,
is possible. It's actually really quite unlikely. There's a massive oversupply in the game's jobs market right now because, well, all of those layoffs. And all this means that if those people want to continue making games, they've got to pay for development costs. There's a little bit of a problem there because development costs have goddamn skyrocketed. Now then, the first
it's only has skyrocketed because a good majority, a lot of developers, at least a really good chunk of it, at least. I don't know how much percentage it is, literally, but a lot of them are literally in California. California is fucking expensive, okay? All right? So that means the wages have to go up for those developers at the end of the day. So they have to pay more out of their pockets, at least the higher ups, to pay these developers, So I'm like, it's fucking expensive.
bit of meat for this video, an analyst group
Because we took a look at it, right? So one developer in California is equivalent to 2 to 3 developers in the Eastern Asian territory because of the cost difference. That's literally a big difference between, from California to the Eastern Asian side. It's between 2 to 3 developers. It's pretty fucking massive, I'm not gonna lie.
Hush Crasher recently put out a deep dive on how much it costs to make games right now. And it's pretty rough. So they found that the average game development budget, regardless of scale, has doubled since 2015. And as soon as you start looking at AA and AAA teams, you see the budgets have tripled. So at the top end, it's gone completely insane, but even the smallest solo games are still getting more and more expensive to make than they were, say, 10 years ago. And of course, as with everything else, some of that is just inflation as the world undergoes economic chaos, madness. But inflation isn't everything. So these analysts found that without inflation, 2025 budgets would have been 28% lower than they were. But the rest is actually just higher costs. Costs that have to be earned back when they sell a game to you if the studio wants to, survive and maybe make another game, which is the really important thing. But to focus in on costs, this increased cost is often just attributed to team size, but it's more than just that. It's paying, yes, perhaps more devs, but also ones with more specialized roles, and even the likes of, your management, your producers, all those things can increase a budget. But so too will the one thing that can make a game stand out to you, the audience, and that's increasingly needed as more and more games get released.
I'm gonna be honest with you, the amount of games that are being, like, literally, because we just watched Summer Game Fest and everything like that, the amount of games that are being released between September and October, a lot of those games are going to fail, as in, like, financially. Like, they will sell, but the problem is they're, like, in a couple of days from within each other, it's fucking massive. I'm like, I get it. They're trying to get their quarter yearly, finance shit, but they should have at least like put some of those games in the beginning of next year. Because I know for a fact they're not trying, because the reason is because they don't want to compete against GTA because GTA is coming out this year, but like most of those games are going to cost $60 to $70. And they're all within like a couple of days from within each other, plus the indie games that people might be interested. They're probably only going to be able to afford to buy one AAA game and then maybe like 1 or 2 indie games afterwards. And that's basically it. Or they're just only going to buy the indie games and not even care about the AAA games that are coming out between September and October. I'm just saying. Maybe just space out the timings in my personal opinion, but like I said, that's just me anyways. But I understand, the the yearly, quarterly, uh finals that they have to do or so to earn the money, and that's a whole different topic subject that I personally I'm not super well inversed in, but I'm just saying.
And that is scope. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone's suddenly out there making open world games. That would be insane. But it does mean you've got to look a certain way at your game. Your game will have to feel a certain way. It'll have to meet quality of life and content standards that are far higher than they were 10 years ago. A developer can make the same game they made a decade ago for the same cost, or maybe less. But the thing is, to stand out, they would probably need more money. And the
I don't think so. I don't really think you need more money or so for you to stand out. It's just literally just artistic style and just a good story. Like, if you have a really good artistic style of the game itself, it's going to stand out far beyond other than compared to some of the other games. Especially because so many like developers are using the Unreal Engine. Everything just looks the same with the Unreal Engine. But if you have a distinct art style, you're gonna stand out from the crowd. Yeah, gameplay. Yeah, the gameplay is nice, but story wise is also what captivates a lot of people at the end of the day. But mostly, the first thing that you notice when a game trailer pops up, right? Because you look at visuals all the time, right? It's the art style. The art style is what gravitates you almost immediately to watch the actual trailer. Then it's the gameplay afterwards. Then it's the story afterwards, because now they have story talking in between the gameplay and the cutscene. But it's the art style is what gravitates you towards that.
really rough thing is that getting any money at all is where the trouble truly starts. The most damning graph Hushcrasher shares is this. And even if you're a solo dev, basically, you've now got to scrape together as much money to self-publish your game as a publisher would have once handed you. Somehow. Meanwhile then, publishers are basically
I'm like, to be honest, if the video game crashes, tell Sony, thank Sony actually, thank Sony for the video game crash, because they're the ones who literally fucking imploded with Concord and fucking Hunter's Gathering Marathon. All of this money that they're shoving into these goddamn live service games, it's because of their fault. So just blame them.
just betting in games that they think are more likely to break through and give them a good rate of return. So the cost of delivering a game is going up, and the people holding the purse strings are basically tighter than ever. I mean, 2025, just for one example, saw the lowest gaming startup funding since 2019. And
Because people are a lot, if this is just my theory or so, right? People are a lot more cautious, especially the guys who want to invest money into the video games, because what's been happening in the Western side, a lot of the video game projects have been fucking failing. I wonder why. I wonder why they've been failing. Huh? It's not fucking rocket science. Jesus Christ. I'm gonna take a look at the Eastern Asian and what's been happening. Capcom has been fucking hiring developers at the end of the day, Like, literally straight up, Capcom has been giving W's. They also stopped doing the live service games as well. On top of that, they finally have woken up and said that live service is not the way to go, because they've seen what's been happening with Sony of America, not Sony Japan, Sony of America.
What was there went into mobile games and betting. But to put that in terms that we'll feel as players, it basically means more trend chasing, less chance follow-up games, and developers who may just crash and burn before their game can be great. A big reason why very often a game launches and is kinda shit, or, disappointing, maybe full of bugs, full of performance issues. It's because often the developer has literally no choice but to publish. And so
That is
often the
true.
developer will take the brunt.
But the thing is about this specifically, what I have to argue against it is that, like, they have to publish the game, right? They can't do any more dev times and everything like that. The problem is, it's like, okay, so what the hell have you been doing during your game development time? I'm like, you're supposed to be like leading this team to a clear course on how you want the game, you know? You should already have like a set path. It'd be like, okay, I want to make this genre of a game and I want to mix it with this genre of a game. let's work on a technical alpha test for this game, you know? And then you start like tinkering and tweaking a few things here and there, but you should already know, like, you should already have a specific set path of how you want this game to be done and how because if at the end of the day, if you launch the game, because High Guard is the best example, right? You launch the game, right? You did no beta test whatsoever, and you decided to do like internal testing, which internal testing is not the same thing as on the field testing. Because on the field testing, you get more opinions from everybody. Because it would have been a lot better to be like, hey, we're going to have this beta, so we need your feedback on what we can do and what we need to change for the game itself before the launch of the game at the end of the year. And that's basically it. And then just have a second beta test afterwards. It's not hard, But they shot themselves in the foot because they decided to shadow drop the game instead of, well, not necessarily. Well, they were planning to shadow drop it, but because they wanted to capture that moment or so from Apex Legends, which is not the same. The environment is not the same thing anymore. Plus, also at the same time, the mechanics that they were working on or so did not fit very well. So,
Even though, in many cases, if you were to say, audit all of their emails and communications, you would find devs basically begging publishers
first.
for time. It's one of those tricky things within game development where, funnily enough,
access if you
an
want to
extremely advanced 2-year software project is something that's very hard to perfectly plan down to the month in advance. Yet, that ends up being...
And I'll be honest with you, as an FPS player, I love FPS games. FPS is in my blood and everything. This FPS was shit. That's all I gotta say. This was not a good FPS game. If you thought this was an actual good FPS game, holy shit, your standard in FPS games is so bottom of the barrel, I wouldn't even wipe my own ass with it, to be honest. Like, straight up.
Situation all too many devs fall into. But what makes the situation even harder for you or me, say, just people who want to play fun video games, it's that games are a really bad investment, unless you specifically are someone who wants to fund and make video games. If you're an investor holding $100,000, which is enough to pay, say, a 3-person team decent enough salaries for a year, well, where are you going to get a better return on that 100 grand? Could it be, say, an indie game that might need another year of investment? Or is it just putting that money into a market tracking account? There's risk on both sides, but I think we'd all admit that the game side has way more risk, and even if it does pay off and, a game does come out.
Here's a tip for the investors. I'm gonna give you a tip. Come a little closer. If you're watching this, you guys are the investors. Come here. Just come here. Let me just lend me your ear. Lend me your ear for a second. Fucking invest in the Eastern Asian market. They're going to dominate the fucking video game industry. Okay? All right? They are literally going to dominate. All right? There has been a documentary video that came out a couple of years ago that literally China itself said that they are going to replicate the Western video game industry, but make it better. That's all I have to say. You want to invest on your money? Do it in the Eastern Asian side. Trust me, you will get your monies back a lot more confidently than compared to the Western side.
And is maybe even profitable,
and that's just the truth.
It may still lose to simply just leaving money in the market. Here's a quote. I think about those projects, especially over the last 5 years, what didn't get made because no one would give them 100 grand. What could have changed the way we thought about games because that game was only ever going to make $500,000, which would change a developer's life. Now, that quote was from Rebecca Saltzman, who's the CEO of Finji. They're a publisher, most recently of Night in the Woods and Tunic. Now, she was talking to PC Gamer about the funding squeeze that's facing indie devs right now, where basically the traditional money people want Vampire Survivors or Balatro-style successes from solo devs, or are trying to go and back the next Expedition 33 with a budget of millions. Small teams making small games without that huge potential just aren't worth a publisher's time, and raising funds from outside of games.
Well, of course not, because you've seen what's been happening yourself. Take a look at what Sony has done. Take a look at some of the games that have been failing so far as of recently. And I bet you, like, I'm gonna say this for example, that what is it, Ghost of Yote game? It also failed too. It failed financially. It definitely did. That God of War game that's gonna be coming out in the future, that also is going to fail financially. Is it going to sell? Yeah, of course it's going to sell, but it's not gonna recover its money cost. It definitely is not. Especially if that game is literally only on the PlayStation. That game that's not getting its money back 100%. Its development cost and being positive, and also being positive too as well. No, that is still going to be in the red for a while.
Is extremely hard, because if you look at the balance sheet of any pre-release video game like development studio, it's going to look horrible if you're a traditional, say, financial institution. Now, even if a developer somehow does get the funds and launches, well, the cost of publishing can still kill them after release. Most developers work on a recoup model, where until their funding is paid off from game revenue, developers get somewhere between nothing and almost nothing. All those studios that form from, say, laid-off devs who magically secure funding and...
I feel like, in my personal opinion, when it comes to advertisement now, I think in the new day and age of advertising, instead of like trying to do it on the big stage for advertising, you should just start, you should just go after like content creators to advertise the game, in my personal opinion, you know? Girl power will save Western games? No, will not. Like, I think, in my personal opinion, like, when it comes to these developers, I think they should start, like, start working with certain content creators. And, like, I know it's not really, like, the best way to do it, right? Because there's some ups and downs on it at the end of the day. They could be faking their numbers and everything like that, right? That's the negative side. Like, they could be faking their numbers, and then, you're not really going to sell them anything or whatnot, right? But I suggest, that this it's just a gamble. It's just a gamble at the end of the day. But they have to do their like research or so on who they should advertise their game to.
Take this shit no more, man.
And so I think, in my personal opinion, if you want to get a more broader scope for like in audiences for advertisement, and you don't want it to break the bank and everything, I suggest, going towards that route instead of trying to get it onto like the big stage or something, or trying to get it into in every nook and cranny for advertisement.
Build their game for an audience that likes it, they may still collapse in the aftermath. And there's a specific way that this whole dynamic hurts us as customers so badly. So let me explain, because it's more than just, game came out, we don't have any money, now we're gone. Right. So whenever your game comes out, you'll get a bunch of money into Steam.
Not just
now
reviewers.
That'll, of course, go to your publisher. Then it will go through the recoup, and then you will be paid. Now, you could be paid in payment terms that are like, say, net 45, so it could be quite a bit of time until you actually get money. Maybe 1 or 2 payroll cycles. That could be pretty damn challenging. But here's the thing. The amount of money that you will get in an early stage of your game's recoup will almost certainly not be enough to cover your burn rate unless your game is a real outlier success. So what that basically means is, before you ship your game, you need to have funding lined up for your next game. How the hell do you do that? Well, you've got to actually develop a prototype for that game. You've got to have your pitch. You've got to go around trying to sell that to publishers, or maybe trying to find some, like, government, like local economic growth fund stuff, any of that. Now, do you know what that's maybe not ideal for? The first game coming out at a perfect level of quality. Because if a studio puts 100% of their focus into just that one game, yeah, that may well increase the chances of it having less bugs, less issues, polished stuff. But it's also fairly likely that it will leave a developer basically up shit creek without a paddle, because if you don't have that funding lined up well in advance, it is a bit of a tough shit situation, and you could go under, which would mean that even if your publisher does continue to sell your game, and they almost certainly would be, obviously, the recoup won't matter anymore. It'll just all go to the publisher. And this is the kind of thing, the kind of incentive structure that can put all of us against each other, that can make it so that a developer may be just tearing themselves up trying to make everything work, but absolutely know that unless they can secure maybe some prototype funding for their next game, that they can't just focus on the launch of their current game. Because if they do, they risk the entire company just going kaput. Which is to say, it's a fairly grim situation all around. But there are certainly indie
Thank you for
games
the
you and
follow.
I have
Welcome,
seen
Kong.
that have sold insane.
Yeah, but if you don't have the money to publish it yourself, like I said, I already said it specifically, like the choices that they can do or so. Just have the content creators do the advertisement for them, you know.
Quantities, especially relative to the team size. That's meant many of those
And like I
teams
assume it'll
have a
cost less
pretty nice
than, you
amount of
know,
cash lying around. And the good news
getting it
is
on
that some
Summer
of those
Game Pass
teams
or
are
something.
now trying
Hey,
to
King.
fix the problem. Outer Sloth are not a games publisher, and they're not a knockoff of Inner Sloth, the people who made Among Us. They are, in fact, the funding arm of Inner Sloth. And they're basically giving money to games like Clickholding, Mars First Logistics, and Flock Around. Tiny games with niche audiences, but experiences that you kinda can't get anywhere else. There ain't that many games like Clickholding. But most importantly, because they're not a publisher, they offer fair recoup rates that let devs build sustainably, which is because, being indie devs themselves, they know that no one else is fighting for them at this scale. At least they hadn't been. We are seeing more and more companies start to do this kind of thing. There's Landfall, the co-developers behind Peak, who have just revealed Evil Landfall, their indie investment arm, which is invested in bringing games like Repo to the market. There's Plasmaphobia's Kinetic Games, who have just announced plans to fund 2 to 3 indie games per year. So basically, we're seeing indie devs backing indie devs to make sure they actually get their shot at putting some of their experience to work in a way that'll actually get a game in front of you and hopefully not leave them completely screwed once the game publishes. And that's because right now, just about no one else is going to do this bit right. We've been in a hell of a journey today, starting with the Romeros, the talk of the game crash feeling crashier than the one of the 80s from a dev's perspective. And actually, for their scale of company, just any large enough indie that's got
My question is, if the investors would just invest a little bit of money into the developers instead of putting their whole eggs in one basket or so, wouldn't they be able to get to recoup that amount of money? Take care, Hazu. Like I feel like they would recoup because like for some apparent reason, I don't know why though. When it comes to triple A's in general, they like to put all of their eggs in one basket. Like just pour in an absorbent amount of money in some of these games, but we all know for a fact they're not gonna recoup that amount of money. That's the craziest thing about it. So
fairly decent staff count. Yeah, I actually do think it is very crashy right now. And the sad part of this is it's all at a scale that means there's very little you or I can do about it. Now, the funding from Outer Sloth, Landfall, and Kinetic Games, you know, it's good, but it cannot replace billions of investment every year, with indie devs these days getting crumbs compared to, say, well, the good times or the bad good times, by which I mean the investment boom during COVID. Because goddamn, people were able to raise money back then, but, well, booms do tend to lead to bubbles and bursts, don't they? And likewise, these indie funders can't reckon with, say, the scale of funding pulled from the developers that NetEase and Tencent set up during the COVID boom as well. They can't fix an economic crisis that leaves people choosier than ever when it comes to spending money in games. But what they can do is back devs making games you'll love, the sorts of games that deserve to reach you. And while they cannot save the games industry, they can at least make sure a few more games reach you than if they didn't try. Now, we really want to fix up the games industry. What we need is more people buying games. And the best way to do that is to make sure people can actually find games they'll love. This is now a problem that's so bad that one of the guys who set up Steam Labs is basically sounding the alarm bell. And if you want to learn all about that story, check out this video next.
I'm like, the only people who don't play games are fucking Sony players. They don't play new games. It's like the only ones, like literally the only people who don't play new games is literally straight up the Sony players. The Sony players are literally the only ones who do not play new games, okay? All right? This has been proven a fact that Sony players don't play new games. The only ones who play new games are literally PC players. PC players are the only ones who actually play new games. The problem is that the game is even good is what catches the drift of people, you know? I'm like, those games that that he just showed for an example, they don't really interest me that much, so I wouldn't buy them personally. Somebody will, but I'm personally not. Don't hate them eating the recycled slop. Well, I just gotta say, you know, it's something at the end of the day. But overall, yeah, like I said, like these are like my own two opinions of what I think of what they can do or so. I'm like, at the end of the day, the Western market or so when it comes to video games has been in the shitter for quite some time because of what's been happening. And it's going to prove even more shittier when Hunter's Gathering comes out, the God of War game that comes out, the what is it? What's that one game? That heisting game that like Sony is also doing another live service promoting for that one. Oh, Fair Games, you know? That also is going to flop too as well, you know? And then we're just waiting for Marathon to just die completely for them to learn and understand that, you know, enough is enough, you know? Like stop. Follow what the Eastern Asian market is doing and you will make money. You want money? You want us to give you money? Just copy the same thing what the Eastern Asian devs are doing and you will make money. Because at the end of the day, you're making video games for guys, for gamers. Okay? You're not making them for this weird people or so that don't even play the video games. These like weird people that are mentally ill that are fucking always online all the damn time. I'm just saying, you know? I'm like, you want to make money? You want us to pay money for your fucking video games? Just fucking copy what they're doing and that's it. It ain't that fucking hard. It's really not rocket science on like making a good video game. Like straight up. Like it's pretty obvious to be honest. I don't know. Maybe that's just me or so, but like I said, you do what you want to do. Like I said, it's your money, right? The investors that you know that's your damn money. You do whatever you want to do, and if you want to lose money that badly or so, you might as well just set it on fire at that point, you know. But hey, you do whatever you do. Anyways, that's the end of the video. And yeah, like I said, this is just my own personal opinion on what I think. You know, I'm like the Western market or so for video games has been dying because the way how they've been treating gamers at the end of the day, and then China came in and swept with Black Myth Wukong, and that set the wave or so for like so many Chinese games that now even Japan has realized and has woken up finally that they don't have to do the same thing what like literally the Western side is doing. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Like I said, all in due time. We will see what happens in the Western market because a lot of people are getting laid off and all this other shit and all this other stuff. But like you know, what do you expect at the end of the day? There's still one specific game that I have. There are 3 games that I am waiting. One of them I am waiting. It's one of my game friends or so, one of my developer friends that are making a video game. But I am still waiting because that trailer was announced a couple of years ago and I haven't heard a single thing about it. But I'm probably gonna do some research on it just to see if it's still alive or not. But yeah. Anyways, that's the end of the video. And peace.